Are billions of people going to burn in hell forever? Personally, I doubt it, but I'm not in charge. But here's what I do know. Once you get to know the Lord, you learn some truths. You learn that He is love, and you begin to learn what components of that love are. The components of that love are many, vast, but the one I want to talk about in the context of this conversation is consequences for actions. They are a component of love. Any authority figure who does not let or impose consequences for actions happen to children is not loving them, because they're not teaching them reality. They're teaching them that they can just do whatever they want without ramifications, which will get them seriously hurt. So, consequences for actions are a component of love. There's no two ways about it. So, that being the case, we have to think about our actions, okay? And when we think about our actions, there's a vast array of actions, okay? There's actions that mean nothing and have no import or consequence at all, way over here on this end of the spectrum, all the way over here to very, very, very important actions that have great consequences for ourselves and others, especially as we become responsible for others, when we become parents or other authority figures in kids' lives and in other people's lives. So that's on this end of the spectrum, okay? Now, the Bible says in at least one spot in 1 John that there are sins that lead to death and sins that do not lead to death. And the Apostle John gives a little expose on that. But it's important to understand that. Like, there's some things that we do, and God's like, okay, that was kind of silly, but it's not worthy of death, right? But there's some things that human beings do that apparently lead to death, okay? And if you think about this, like, some people might think this is not fair because they don't, people who argue against the death penalty, and I understand that. But I also understand those who do argue for it, because some things that human beings do, like, they deserve death, okay? Don't make me explain it, right? There's not a lot of those things, but they exist, And so if you think about everything on that spectrum compared with those Bible verses, there are some actions that have varying degrees of consequences, okay? On this end of the spectrum, the consequences are minimal and have hardly any effect on us. They get more and more important. Over here, that the actions have great consequences, right? Depending on if they're proper actions or improper actions, okay? So in this context, let's talk about the improper ones, okay? So there are consequences for those, right? In life, natural consequences, as well as consequences from God being the perfect authority figure, okay? So if some of those consequences necessitate death, that's a component of love, okay? Now, I didn't say burning in hell forever, but I did say death, right? So what does God do, okay? He sends Jesus along to take that death in our place, right? That's one of the main tenets of the gospel, that his death paid the penalty for those sins and those actions that are worthy of death. Not all of them, right? Only the ones over here. That's even biblical, right? There is a sin that leads to death, and there are sins that do not lead to death. That's 1 John. Check it out. Okay? So it's very logical that we would be wise to accept Christ's payment for those sins that are worthy of death, that necessitate death. Okay? Either natural consequences or God imposing them. Okay? The rest of them, it's my personal opinion that God just says, okay, well, since the blood of Christ and the death of Christ paid for those sins that lead to death, I'm going to let his death and his blood just pay for all of them, no matter the consequence or import of them, right? That's my opinion. I don't have that on authority from the Lord. Okay? But it's a logical thing to do if you're God and you're trying to provide a solution for the human race who needs to have consequences for their actions for their own good, for their own mental and spiritual and emotional well-being and health, right? But he also doesn't want everybody to just die, okay? So that is a much more realistic view than, oh, just everybody's going to burn in hell forever, okay? Now, I know what Revelation says, and I know there's several verses that seem to imply that and say that, but there's also verses that say the opposite. Okay? If you read the Bible enough, you start to see both. So what do? You go to the Lord himself, you have a relationship with him, you listen to the Spirit of truth, and you understand truths like the one that I just explained, and you can use that truth and match it up with what you see in the Bible and come out with a healthy understanding of the fact that, yes, there are consequences, and yes, some of them are very unpleasant. Not all of them. Some of them are great, right? Some of our consequences we deal with are fantastic when we do great things, right? But you can superimpose that understanding of the truth of things. You can combine that with those scriptures and make sense of things and go, okay, whether or not people are going to burn in hell forever, there are consequences for actions, and they need to be dealt with in a healthy way. What is that way? Either we take it ourselves or we don't. We accept the gracious and loving and kind and beneficent gift of God, Christ himself, taking it for us. It's really that simple to understand, so you really don't have to worry about much beyond that. Thank you and have a nice day.